Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fast Furious Fall Features! Yeah! Hello all, and welcome back to the first episode of Fast Furious Fall Features. It's a lot of F's in a row and none of my favorites in there. My name, as always, is Mr. Harlan Guthrie. I am here once again with my lovely and talented wife, Mrs. Joe Guthrie. How you doing tonight, darling?
Doing so good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I can see you're in the same room as me, so I don't even really need to ask about you. But I want people to know that I care, so that's why I do it.
It's all a facade.
As is everything. We are joined tonight by three of Peg's lifeblood. We are joined by Simon, Donald, and Jess, who will be joining us momentarily. But because Jess isn't here right now, let's really draw this out and introduce one at a time who's joining us tonight. Starting off, Simon Lucas, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell the people at home who you are at Peg and what you do?
I'll wait for the applause to die down.
Oh, they love you. They're eating it up.
Thanks, Alan. I'm Simon Lucas. I'm the president of Pinnacle. That's 2 P's. That's not easy to say.
Excellent.
So my job has been to basically take all the manuscripts and get them ready to print, send them to print, make all the corrections, get them on a ship, bring them back, and pass everything over to Jody to deliver to our backers. Now, that's a lot of stuff, and we've been adding extra people over the last couple of years to stop me from drowning. So that's why we're here with Donald, and also hopefully with Jess if she can make it. She's running a little late, so these Donald and Jess have come on board to really help me out and basically taken a huge weight off me to make sure we can deliver a little quicker.
Hells yeah. Awesome. Excited to have you on the show. Look, they love you. They're eating it up. Donald Shepis, please, again, tell us a little bit about where you fit into the big scheme of this. Everyone give him a round of applause. Come on, get him on stage. There you go.
So, as it says down there in the corner, I'm Donald Shepis. I'm a developer for Peg. And that means basically I professionally hold Simon's head under the water so that we ensure he drowns. But I handle a little bit of everything. At this point, I touch, from beginning to end, a little bit of everything, right? So right now, when we're doing a crowdfunding campaign, I help do the planning, the setup, create the graphics, the copy text for the books. Right now, I'm stuck in, and every time we send out a PDF and we get feedback from the lovely community, I'm the person that goes through and combines that and turns that into something that the authors can use, making the change logs. Depending on the project, I'm also involved with getting art orders done and, maybe here and there writing some of the text myself. I'm always working with the team when it comes to making sure that our designs are in parity. And so just basically, I'm the person on the team that if we need something done and it doesn't fall into somebody else's lap neatly and it's not in their wheelhouse, I'm the person that figures out how do we do it and how do we get done.
Hells yeah. Everyone needs one of you, multiple of you. Thank you both for joining us, and we're excited to
Donald
talk
also
Jess.
forgot to mention that he also took all of the translation teams off my plate.
Oh, yeah.
So
Wow.
whenever we have any of our products translated into another language, Donald works with those teams to make sure that everything gets approved and that they haven't changed anything they shouldn't. So it's a ton of work.
Holy crap. Well, that's what this, I guess, tonight is about. Mm-hmm. And all fall long, if you were here for our Savage World Summer Showcase, we were highlighting every week people from the community that were working in and around swag and making it, well, just that much better than what it has started out and now what it is. And this entire fall season, we're going to be doing similar features to this. Tonight is all about finding out the details, the nitty gritty, maybe the dirt under the core development team. We're going to talk about, design and layout software, how books get printed, how pawns are made, all that kind of fun stuff that you, the community, has been asking over the years, to be honest. And we're hoping to kind of pull back the curtain and show that there is an angry man with white hair who is speaking loudly over a talk box.
A lot of pain, a lot of blood, a lot of misery.
You joke about the white hair. You can't really see it in this lighting, but I have started going gray.
That's okay. I think we're all there, and that's just the way it is. Let's start off. I know I was reading through some of the comments that a lot of people were talking about game changers in many different ways. Donald, why don't you start us off? For those who are completely unaware, for the uninitiated, give us a quick brief on game changers. What is it?
So Game Changer, straight and simple, is our own in-house crowdfunding platform, right? So it allows us to do basically anything we would do at another platform like Kickstarter or Game on Tabletop or Indiegogo or any of those, right? Where we can bring a campaign forward, we can show folks what is the cool stuff that they're going to get if they back, give people an opportunity to build hype, to build towards stretch goals, unlock things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to make, because ultimately we're always driven by what the people watching want, right? And so Game Changer allows us to have a lot more power and flexibility because it's our own system, and it lets us do things that we would otherwise be unable to do on other platforms. And also, we get the whole chunk of the pie, right? And because we're so much plugged into crowdfunding campaigns as the lifeblood of the way that we are able to constantly make the things that you folks like, right? Without the support of the community, we're not able to do this. And this just removes a middle step and lets us have a more direct consumer relationship than we would previously.
It has an additional benefit for us too, in that typically after we'd finished on a Kickstarter campaign, we would move over to BackerKit or Pledge Manager or some other back-end project that would let us handle like additional backers, late backers, collect shipping and all of that kind of stuff. By using Game Changer, we move all of that onto our website, where people can add anything that's in our store into their initial pledge, and that lets them benefit from much cheaper shipping, which is a huge deal right now.
I mean, having it more streamlined in any way always means it's going to be beneficial for not just the consumer, but also the people producing it. And I think no one would say that, PEG hasn't been amazingly supportive of its community, because the very nature of the company is really sort of trying to give power to create in the hands of the people who want to create, which is a really nice way to sort of allow that streamlined feeling to come back in many ways for those people, who are backing. And I know there's a lot of people, from speaking to them personally, that are kind of just in for whatever's coming through the pipeline because it's you guys and they trust you. And I think that's a really great, a way to have a brand in this.
Yeah, we're super fortunate to have like a base of fans like that who are so supportive of all of, the Savage Worlds can support a massive variety of settings, and we're doing everything from horror to sci-fi, and it's so good to have a wide range of people who are going to be in for everything, as you say. Just want to try everything that Savage Worlds can handle.
Since you started the Game Changers method, I suppose, what has been the most popular product that you've released that the people have just been clamoring for?
Well, I mean, from like a pure numbers standpoint, right, the companions just are, everybody wants them, right? And it's by nature of what they are. They're not a specific setting. They're not, a specific adventure. It's a tool set. And ultimately, that's where Savage Worlds shines so much, that, you get the core rulebook and you've got this massive tool set of things that you can do. And then you go and you get the Superpowers Companion or the Fantasy Companion, right? And it just expands and lets you still have a very wide range of fantasies, right? There's a reason in all those books we have, here's the 5 or 6 or 7 different subgenres that we support. And so folks love the companions, right? As far as what Game Changer brings specifically, definitely one of the most popular things has been I can bundle all of my orders, right? So like you said, we got a lot of folks that we love you. You back multiple campaigns a year from us. And, unlike with Kickstarter, where you're going to pay, 1, 2, 3 times shipping over the course of everything, we can condense all that down into one bigger palette, save you, especially for our international backers. And you definitely have the right group when we are very aware of the shipping pains. Simon and I spend a lot of time, Simon more so than me, but we spend a lot of time worrying about how can we make shipping better for folks? How can we make it faster, more efficient, cheaper, right? I get to be sandwiched between Simon, who worries about it on the let's get our stuff printed and to people, and then between Jody, who's, okay, now how do we actually get it from our warehouse to the people and make sure it's as efficient and fast as possible?
Well, and then also
I'm sure
you'll
speak to Jody at some point in the future, but but that's mainly her headache. Once I get it into the country, kind of like I can let go of it and breathe a sigh of relief.
Well, and I think it's indicative of the fact that you have your finger on the pulse of the community as well, too, because these are things that you are, being upfront about. You're seeing the problems that other platforms have and solving them, not just because it's necessarily easier for you, which in some cases it might not be, but because it's simpler for the people who are checking out. And I think that's a really important distinction when dealing with this kind of stuff. But, we're going to talk a lot tonight about all of the back end stuff. Let's back it up a little bit. How did we get into gaming? Donald, what started this whole thing, this love of wanting to work in this field? Was this something you always wanted to do? Bring us back to, let's start with your first introduction into role-playing games in general.
So I've got a very laser focused on how I got in. So back in 2006, a game came out, a video game called Star Wars Republic Commando. And I was in love with that game, and that led me to finding a fan forum called Brothers All, and it had a role-playing game section, right? And this is play-by-post, more like collaborative fan fiction stuff. But it was a short jump from meeting people on there, playing video games with them, playing these play-by-post games, to getting into one of their tabletop games. And then that launched me, somewhere in my mid-teens into playing tabletop role-playing games in general, right? Starting from, custom bespoke stuff to that the GM had made, to the West End Star Wars game. I actually have I don't know if there's an easy way for me to show, but this is the character I played for 4 years in a West End game.
Wow.
Because that was very much that's why I have this tattoo. Republic Commando got me into making video games, and then I, got in love with the art of making games in general. And then I actually know a former coworker of Simon and Shane back when they worked at Cheyenne Mountain Entertainment. And a guy by the name of Hugh Henry. Thanks for the recommendation, Hugh. And that put me in touch with Simon and Shane, and we started. They were like, "Hey, we've got this Savage Pathfinder thing that we're starting," and you talked about how you've played a bunch of Pathfinder, and then it just rolled into, I'm an egotist. I'll say I'm just really good at what I do, so people want to work with me.
Well, hey, I mean, put it this way: there are a lot of people out there, especially now, that play tabletop role-playing games. There's a distinction between those who play them and then want to work in the field or try to find a place within that. What was it specifically that clicked for you to push you over the edge? Was it just the ego being like, I could do this better than others, or was it kind of like, oh, I need to be doing this every day?
Opportunity.
Yeah.
I always describe there's a difference between, like, I also briefly the way I knew Hugh was I taught at a university for a little bit for video games, and I've always described it as it's not something I get to choose, it's a compulsion, right? If I wasn't working in either tabletop games or video games, I'd be writing for maybe TV or something else, right? There'd be a creative field that I was in, because for me, very much, I always told my students, right, you're going to want to do this if somebody told me you can either never work in games again or we'll take your left arm, take my left arm every single time. Right? It's that feeling of that I've always got that feeling of having homework, right? Because I could be doing something else, or I could be writing and creating and working on the next game that I'm working on.
That's true.
So it's very much just a compulsion and at this point, nearly a decade of not letting anything stand in my way from trying to pursue that compulsion.
Not even a left arm.
It's interesting that you got into the hobby through kind of a remote genre, right? With the play-by-post. Do you still employ some of those like older habits? Are you still on the forums at all, or are you
still posting?
Have you migrated entirely to like a face-to-face game? How do you normally perform your gaming hobby these days?
Well, so I am very much a product of the 90s and 2000s, right? All my best friends, like I recently just met my best friend last year at his wedding, and I've known him for nearly a decade,
so
right?
funny.
And we play tabletop role-playing games, and that was the first time we'd ever been in the same room. And so that's how it's always been for me, is I went from the play-by-posts, and the only reason that died out is because the forums I went to all started dying. But then playing the tabletop role-playing games, I had all these friends, in the UK and in Canada and across the United States that I still wanted to play games with. So 90% of the games I play are actually online, like right now for tabletop games, it's all via Roll20 because that's the thing that we all have, meeting, running a game every other week. And just recently, like in the past month and a half, because I've been kind of like, with everything that's going on, I'm an extrovert. Talking to people, hanging out with people is the thing I love. And after a fair amount of cajoling from my wife, who was like, well, "Why don't you get back into play-by-post RPGs?" I'm actually in a one that just started like a month ago, so I'm kind of going
Hey.
full circle and going
Is it
back.
on a Discord or what's the like?
I found a posting on Reddit. It was somebody was wanting to run a Star Wars game, and I was like, and I just gotten the tattoo, and I was like, I'm really kind of jiving for
Can't
Star
not
Wars.
do it.
And they've just got it's just a Discord server that they set up for the game, and you know, it's a post every day, every other day, depending on how the other folks go, and
Awesome.
it's weird. My experience, the weirdest experience I've had thus far playing games was at our Deadwood event, because I am not used to seeing people when I'm running games. Right, we don't do it with cameras on. It's just voice, right? And so to play games more and more. With being able to look people in the eye, right? It was also like when we were doing the various playtests, like the Savage Pathfinder playtest, it was very weird for me to see the other people and be like, no, wait, Simon's playing like a gnome rogue who's like, it was a very weird thing to get over that I think most people probably don't have to deal with, of like especially as a GM, how am I going to do my not great, guy who runs the Gem Saloon, Al Swearingen impression, when I'm looking at these four people right there, you know, an arm's length away, and I'm like, this is weird, and I didn't have to deal with this kind of like almost stage fright.
But the trade-off is you get to see the reactions when it lands, which is kind of nice, because you don't get you might get some vocals like, "Oh, that was good," but people smiling at a fun impression, that must feel good too, right?
Well, I don't think they were smiling at Deadwood.
Oh, sorry, the people booing at you, people being like, "Oh my God, Donald, why did you pull that out?" That's exciting. That's awesome. That's a good story. I mean, that brings probably a lot of hope to the people who are, you know, loving tabletops and want to lose that left arm to be in them. So inspiring in many ways. Simon, how did you meet the hobby and how did you make the leap?
So I'm so old that only about half of that makes
You're
sense.
85? Holy shit, you wear it well.
So old.
So I started playing when I was probably about 10. I started playing tabletop war games, and so almost everything I've played ever has been face-to-face. I think apart from trying to experiment with playing role-playing games over video back in the UK in probably like 2006 or something, which was terrible. First time I really played online was when pandemic hit and we were all locked down, and then we had to figure out how to play Roll20, which was which was an experience. But generally, everything I've played has been face to face, and so I started playing war games like ancient, you know, tabletop miniatures, and then some people that I was playing with then introduced me to AD&D, and then I went straight to Traveller like very quickly. Played a lot of Traveller, a lot of RuneQuest back then. And then just basically, I just kept playing role-playing games until I kind of stopped around the time I went to university, and then so about 4 or 5 years before I went to university, and then picked it back up again at university. Played a lot of Cyberpunk at university, and then from then, a friend of mine introduced me to collectible card games in like just before 2000, and that was a disaster for me. So
why was it a disaster?
You've got like a magic card.
Oh my God! Well, actually,
behind you, or is that?
I got hooked very quickly, very hard, and so I was playing a lot of Magic, and then a lot of the Vampire game, and that led me to design my own game, and that's a page from my own actual collectible card game.
Very cool.
So that's from the Judge Dredd collectible card game. So it's
coming soon to Game Changers, right?
it came and went.
Reprint. Give us the reprint.
The people want it. They're
card
clamoring.
Games are a deep money pit, but
yes.
But yeah, so that's kind of how I got into making games. Was I decided that collectible card games were a good place to start, and that was not true. And so soon after that, I started writing. I was writing for like D20 modules, and then I already knew Shane, and so I picked up some stuff that Shane had been looking for somebody to finish. Was Rippers for Savage Worlds was the first thing that I wrote for Savage Worlds. And then I took it from there. And so soon after that, I was working on the Deadlands Reloaded book for Savage Worlds, and at that point, I was president of Pinnacle for the first time. And I worked for Pinnacle for several years until I moved into video games, came out to the US to work on a Deadlands video game, which unfortunately never made it to the public.
Oh, no.
But then for several years, I was working in California on the Neverwinter video game. So that was 7 years working on Neverwinter, and then came back to Arizona and picked up working on Suede with Shane again. So never looked back.
Nice. So when you fell off at the first time going into university, everyone kind of has that big spur. What was it that kind of got you back into it? Because I feel like that's a turning point for a lot of people. There's we've interviewed a lot of people through this show and others where it's like, yeah, I played a lot and then I stopped at this point. It's like everyone else's story. And then everyone on this show is kind of like, and then I picked it back a few years later. Was it a friend? Yeah. Was it boredom? Was it...
So it was a combination of things. I went to a very rural, tiny university in the UK where we were miles from anywhere. And my roommate brought in a board game one night, and I was like, I haven't played board games in a really long time. So we sat down and we tried to learn this terrible board game. And then we found a couple of other people. I think we were supposed to be doing some of the movie club or something like that. And we just ended up playing games instead. Nice. And so then that core of people, out of just sheer desperation of like, there is nothing to do in the countryside for hours on end. So we started playing a lot of games.
So really what you could say is where you are in your life right now can kind of come down to being really bored at one really specific time in your life.
Age of 19.
I had nothing to do, and now I'm here. Thank you for that.
It was the same friend who actually then sent me one CCG card, and that's really what launched me into
Wow. Are you still friends with them, though?
I am, yeah. He's a good friend.
And his name is Shane. Whoa! Yeah. No, it's interesting.
Because Shane actually he's a big Judge Dredd fan, and he wanted to import Judge Dredd into the US, and that was how I met Shane.
That's funny. Well, that's interesting. It's so fun to sometimes draw back those, especially, again, like I mentioned, we've talked to a lot of people with storied careers and stuff, and sort of distilling it down to one moment or one decision, to be like, well, I was really bored, and we got sick of these board games, and we need to do something else, and that kind of started my love. Oftentimes, the amount of times you can distill these stories down to kind of one place in time that really changes the trajectory of your life can kind of be exciting to consider at times.
What's that movie? Sliding Doors.
Oh God,
is that a movie?
Paltrow?
I don't know.
That sounds like a movie.
I don't know. I never saw it.
Just the concept of like one moment that can change your life
forever. The butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got a one moment story that's very relevant to this.
Lay it on us.
The first time I met Shane and Simon in person, we went to lunch someplace here in Phoenix, and they, they're asking me a bunch of questions, and they're asking what I was doing right now, and I was in the middle of running an Edge of the Empire game, and I was sitting there, and I'm lucky I was very charitable with the way I described this, because I don't know that I'd be here if I wasn't. But I was complaining about how in Edge of the Empire, the equipment was not systemic. I had a player who's trying to play Mandalorian. I was trying to figure out where does all the equipment stuff go, right? And I was like, I was putting it all in a spreadsheet and breaking down the math, and they just kind of fired from the hip. They didn't really design it, right? It was kind of per piece. There wasn't a system behind it. And I now remember, this might be apocryphal, but I remember Shane kind of smiling and just nodding. And it wouldn't be until after I started working on Pathfinder and I was full-time with Peg that I would recall, oh yeah, Shane worked on Edge of the Empire. And I just messaged him once, was like, hey, what'd you work on? And he said, the equipment.
Oh no!
Well, I mean, but obviously that also speaks to Shane's character as well, to not throw a glass of wine in your face like we've all known him to do.
Well, I think it's very telling that a good designer will take someone's constructive criticism in a positive light and see the person who's offering it as someone who can potentially benefit a company, right? You want ideas that generate new thought patterns, I guess, rather than someone who's like, oh, you worked on Edge of the Empire? Loved it. Loved everything about
it. Was perfect. I love the dice.
Right?
I have 1,000 sets of the dice.
That's
the dice
not
is the best thing I've
helpful.
ever played in the world.
It's better to have people who can generate not like unnecessary friction, but, new helpful ideas. So That's very cool.
Yeah. I mean, again, and not to continue the irony of what I'm about to say, but Peg is that kind of company that does tend to take in stock when people are, they don't shy away from hearing constructive criticism, and being so open with allowing people to kind of play around in their sandbox is, very anti some of the other big companies that are out there right now, where they're like, nope, don't do it unless it's our way.
Mm-hmm.
A certain, what did you call them last week?
Sorcerers of the Beach.
Sorcerers of the Beach, which I really like.
Thank you.
Totally safe version. No one will know what we're talking about.
Veiled, well veiled.
Yeah. Which actually, talking about design and layout, it kind of brings us nicely to a bit of the back end questions and things like that. Design, layout. Obviously, this is sort of a big tent peg pole. Pegs are the things that hammer. We'll go pole. That's a bad action. But a nice tent pole to keep one of the important pieces of this company afloat. Would you care to talk a little bit about that? We've had people asking over the years, how does that sort of break down?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the workflow, everything we do is in Adobe products. So like all of our books are laid out in InDesign. We use Photoshop for everything else. With the exception of like if we need vector graphics for something, we like if we're doing a 3D design like for the coins that we've just started to look at, or something that needs to be etched on the dice, like we have the wild die have a specific pattern on the 6. So those things will be a vector graphic in Illustrator, but just about everything else, all the art is in Photoshop. All the books are laid out in InDesign, and most of the authors that write for us work straight into InDesign, so that they'll write directly into layout. It's faster. It helps to see where things balance on the page, and like you've got a certain amount of space in a chapter. You can write to fill the space, or you can imagine how much art you'll need for a certain project, and it helps rather than having like that extra step of a manuscript in Word or something.
Having to worry about that after you mentioned coins there for a second. Is there anything that you are in your games, especially you, Simon, because you said you play primarily in person, is there anything that physical that you're kind of a sucker for? Are you like, I need to get the best minis or dice?
I am. I mean, that's something we've been doing a lot more of since the Deadlands campaign. I think a couple of years ago, we really started looking at player aids or GM aids, things that would help the GM just have that little extra tactile sense, things that the players can touch and feel. I mean, Savage Worlds always had the bennies, which they're a cool thing on the tabletop. People like to toss that chip in there. We've got some of the hollow chips right here. So these are the new ones that are coming out. So they just, it feels good to just play with them at the table and it'll hand them out as a GM like reward. It's just to be able to toss them out. People feel like they've got things to hang on to. And Jess isn't here, so I can't mock her to her face, but like to sit there with that big stack of chips and not spend any of them while the rest of the team is dying. That's a Jess move. But yeah, so I think that those tactile elements really help me. I am a sucker for those. So we've added, the GM screens, chips. This is one of the new hollow coins that we've got. So this is done in metal. So we just started doing that kind of fancy metal stuff. We did the Deadlands badge, but this is the first time we've done a conviction coin. So
that's fantastic. And what about you, Don? I know you don't play as much in person, but are you a physical sucker as well?
I am.
We're doing show and tell today.
Don't drop it. Don't break it.
I love dice. I'm trying to see. My favorite die right now is one I actually got at Deadwood. It was a Man from Uncle die, which I'm in love with. But yeah, no, I'm a sucker for dice. Nice. Give me all the dice. I have a fair amount of trust with my players. And I'm not a forever GM, luckily. So we actually have about 3 GMs in the group of people running. So we've all, we've been playing together for years. So it's like, yeah, just roll your actual dice. I don't care, right? We almost never use the real roller or the digital roller.
It's just clunky.
The dice are more fun.
It's so nice to hold something, toss it around.
That's the one part that I'll never get behind, rolling in the thing, Unless I have to, obviously, if I don't have a die.
Well, it's handy if you're like running a dragon and you want to roll 20
d6,
right?
No,
rather than...
you're going to sit there while I roll it 20 times, and that's what's going to happen. And I'm going to get my calculator out.
I think maybe because it's more of a novelty for me to play online. I actually quite like the 3D dice bouncing across the screen.
Oh, come on.
Until you get to the point where it's like, well, I'm going to roll 3d6 plus a d4 plus, and then you're trying to figure out how to type that into to actually.
Yeah.
Then I lose interest. But
well, that's the thing, and then you can't justify
roll.
it when you're walking around a convention going, well, I do need more dice because I got that game coming up. And I need something. So obviously, when the physical books get printed, how does that go? Do they just get sent off? Do you have a trusted, printer? Did you have to go through stages of finding the right one that fit?
And what's the worst printing error you've seen in a preview?
Yeah, let's call it out so that everyone can go to the page.
I want to hear all about the terrible issues you've had.
That's going to make me cringe. So we are super fortunate. We have a printer that we use and have done since before I came back and started working with Pinnacle again. So a long time, but and they can do everything that we want them to do. We haven't found anything yet that we have asked them to do that they haven't been able to source somewhere else or find a way to make themselves. We've asked them to do some crazy stuff like that. Our pawns are the most recent kind of challenge that we set them, where we do. Typically when companies do that kind of a pawn sheet or a sheet of standee characters, you'll have each sheet will have maybe a regular pattern to it. So there's a single die where every sheet has the same layout, right? It'll have different art on it, but the layout will be the same on every sheet. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to have the characters have a bit more fun, a bit more shape, a bit more character to them. So we did the kind of like individual outlines where you cut around.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there we go. So
you talk, Simon. I'll be your prop.
Thank you. My lovely assistant will show you now. So we have the die cut conforms to the shape of the character. So it's just a little bit more interesting. And then each one of them has a little base there, so you can set them up. But the layout on those things is crazy. They also have separate backs, so the front and the back is different, so it's not just a reverse. You can tell which way the guy is facing. So.
But small stuff like that, people don't think about it at times. We're easy to open the box or open the bag and complain about it, but rarely do we consider the amount of thought that needs to go into, okay, well, we're not just having a straight square cut. We're going to have it outlined. We're going to have the back look like the back of the character. And stuff like that matters, especially when you're talking about positioning. And, it's really interesting to be like, oh, okay, like, is the demon have its back to me right now? Okay, can I get an advantage or can I, sneak away a little easier? And stuff like that.
And so, there's two things, from a production standpoint, right? One is that those things are a real pain to lay out because, you've got to try and find the correct combinations and make sure you've got enough bases, make sure that the cuts will actually stand and all that kind of stuff. And Jess isn't here to tell you how painful it is, but that I've handed all that off to her. I did the first one, so I was like, it can be done. Jess, do it again. And she took that and ran with it. And so that Jess is the master of making those look good. But then there's also the production side of it where, it is more expensive to print like that, right? To have a separate die for every sheet. And so we're super fortunate that our printer has been able to make that affordable for us. And they've been that way with just about everything we've done. In terms of the process, when we have a new project, typically the first thing we do, we'll spec it out for them, and then they'll send us one of these kind of white boxes, which is it's the entire project but with nothing printed, so you can see like what everything will be. It's handy because we can weigh it and give all of those dimensions to Jody, so she can start on like planning shipping and stuff like that. But also just lets us see what the project will look like, how much we can fit in a box. Especially with some of our later projects, there's been a lot of stuff in the boxes, and arranging it all in there is kind of like would be a tremendous headache for us. But the factory kind of just takes all of that and figures it out for us, which is really handy.
That's wonderful.
From there,
even to the degree of figuring out which of the inserts to hide the dice in, as was I believe it was Pathfinder, right? Because we were so stretched for space. It was a 12-pound box.
Yeah, it is heavy, and that's a good point. They actually figured out that when we wanted to add another set of archetype cards into the box, they could find that they could slot it inside one of the inserts, and it was like, okay, we can still fit it in the same box. You don't have to redesign everything.
A lot of
But,
engineering
they're great
involved.
to work with. And from there, we get the proof copies, where once we've submitted files to them, they'll send us a proof, and then say for something like this, this will be what we'll get. This is the Supers companion. So you get like the printed cover, and then this is folded and gathered. So all the pages have been printed on the correct kind of paper, folded the way that we fold it. It's just not glued and bound properly. So this is kind of our last check through before they do the final assembly. So we get
this is the phase I like to think of as where I start costing the company a bunch of money, because this is the last step where we can really make changes. But it was for free. If I caught it earlier, it would have been for free, and now I'm costing us money.
Yeah,
this is
changes at that
my
point
nail-biting
kind of
stage.
like, oh, you want us to lay out that book again? So
I mean, it happens though,
does.
I mean, it's difficult, especially when it gets that far along. It must feel bad at times to like see something and going, oh shit, But that's kind of where it makes a difference to be like, okay. I mean, recently, I remember a company getting a lot of flack because they released a finished. Oh, it was the Dark Souls role-playing game. The video game they released, they did a Kickstarter and they did the Dark Souls or whatever, and the end result had a bunch of spelling mistakes and things like that in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's painful,
yeah,
and almost inevitable that there will still be something. But and you can guarantee it's the very first thing you see when you open the book too. When we printed Solomon Kane, it was like one of the biggest, full color, very glossy. We poured a lot into making it look beautiful. And I went to Gen Con and we got the first copies, and I took one over to the licensee. And the first thing you do is open the book on a page and go, oh, that's spelled wrong.
Oh no!
So it was just like the first page he opened it to. It might actually have been on the table of contents actually, but
No.
it was like sitting there. It had been there the whole time, and everybody had overlooked it. So it's that's gonna happen.
You're like, no, that's our word. We just sort of like we added our own elven flair to it. We just wanted to make it kind of its own thing.
Right.
You misspelled the. No, it's the. It's like Old English, the.
There's two H's in there for a reason.
Luckily, in my experience, usually for us at this point, it's stuff like, okay, this period got put on the other side of a piece of art, right? And because we go through so many rounds of feedback with the community and our own editing, right? We just, I think, announced on the previous live stream that Brian's now kind of going to be the grammar hammer for all of PEG, right? And
it's your responsibility. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I don't think I've again, this is like the again, a period is in the wrong spot, right? Is anybody going to notice? Probably not. But I don't think I've ever brought one of those things to Simon and Simon said, we won't do it, right? We always shoot for that quality, right? And I think that's it. I saw some folks in the chat talking about how that's why they always back us, because we always make sure we have the bar of quality. And
Absolutely,
so, if we have to make that sacrifice, we will. But luckily, and as time has gone on, I've been with Pinnacle for over a year now, and we're always getting better at that stuff, right? And in part that's because you hired somebody named Donald, and he introduced a whole bunch of problems to the process and made a whole bunch of issues, and now he knows how to do his job finally.
I mean, I appreciate, and I'm sure the community respects the fact that there's no thing too small to kind of fix. I don't know. I feel like there still must be an internal bar where it's like, look, there's two spaces there. We're not going to reprint the book for two. You know what I mean? Like, there's got to be a kind of a line.
There's certainly a cutoff, right? I mean, and there's a point at which.
To which the community would understand too, to be like, why would they? I don't want my book delayed.
Which it's not cost effective, right? If we've already got to this stage, and the book has been printed on the correct paper and is just waiting to be bound, then two spaces stay in the book. But
that's it. To me, it comes down to, guess what? We're human. That's like that.
But by the same token, and like we there are some things that it doesn't matter how much it costs, we have to fix. That there was an error on the Pathfinder contents list on the back of the box that we had to address. So that had already been printed and was sitting waiting to ship, and we had to split the shrink wrap and and fix it.
No.
Just put a sticker over it, white out. And on that note, please welcome to the show, Jess Rogers. Hey, we are so excited to have you with us. Thank you for showing up. Apologies that we couldn't get it all lined up so that we could bring you on at the same time. But
okay.
we're so excited to have you here. Can you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do for Pinnacle?
Sure. So my name is Jess. So I do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. I would consider my job being taking anything off Simon's plate that he needs more time to do other stuff. And so I can do anything between cards, working on books. I do all the pawns. So I can do a little bit of everything, and I kind of just pick up where I'm needed. But any developing stuff is kind of what I do.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. We've already got to hear a little bit about what you do from Simon, talking about, having to do the tedious, taxing, but important work of like getting all those, die cut standees to kind of line up and all that kind of stuff. And we've gotten to hear a lot from them about their processes and stuff. But one of the interesting questions that we asked them that personally I'm really keen to know about you as well, Jess, is how did you get into this hobby of role-playing games? And from there, how did you then pivot to sort of working in the field?
Interesting. Okay. So I actually started playing like old school D&D as a kid. And I played it with my family, like on and off for like 5 years growing up. And then I didn't hear about it again until I was like freshly out of college, trying to figure out, what are my hobbies? Like, what do I do? What do I like? Oh yeah, I could try that again. And so I started like looking for groups. And eventually I actually met Shane Hensley at a convention, and we just got along really great. Ended up exchanging information. I tried out a lot of different things for him, like little practice edit runs and all kinds of different stuff. And eventually it was kind of like, oh, maybe she would fit well here. And so eventually I got hired on, and I've been there, I think, almost 3 years now. So that's how I got into the gaming again. And that's how I got to meet Shane. And from there, I met all these other wonderful people. So
Very cool. I love to hear about a family game of RPGs. What system were you playing? Was it also AD&D or?
Yeah, I think so. I was really little. I was like 6, 7, but my brother was like 9 or 10, and he was the dungeon master for our family.
Aww.
Yeah, and we would play with my parents. So, and that was something we did for a while as kids. So,
do you remember what your character was?
I actually do. I needed help with a name because I was young, and my brother was like, "Oh, I found this really cool warrior name. It's Athena." So I always played Athena, and I was like a warrior or a fighter, and he always kind of helped me a little bit. So
that's so wholesome.
Yeah,
it's a far cry from the characters you play today, Jess.
Oh yeah, well now my characters are cutthroat, crazy.
God butchers.
Yeah.
Athena 2, right. The Reckoning.
With a stack of bennies.
Yeah, with this. We heard that you had a lot of bennies, and
they were dissing you.
You weren't cackling about the deaths, but you recognized that you had the power.
Here's the thing: is they like to complain about it, and then towards the end of the game, there's always some clutch moment where someone's about to die, or someone's. I don't know what was happening last night, but I had this card that I could trade my bennies that nobody knew I had. So I had all these bennies, and they were complaining the whole time about all my bennies, and I give Simon like 4 of them. And I was like, here you go, guys.
We didn't hear that half.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to paint her in too good a light.
Only the negative light.
Exactly.
There's a method to the benny gathering madness, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. But
I'd love to hear a little bit about the play testing process that you all go through. Is everyone in the company kind of gathered around tables, making sure that the new product is airtight, or is there a specific team that works through that? How do you approach that, and what does that look like?
It fluctuates. It tends to be that whoever is writing the book will run something, and depending on the product, that they'll probably be running multiple things. Like when Mike is writing Pathfinder products, he has several groups where he lives that he plays with constantly. And then for some of the bigger stuff, like when we did Rise of the Rune Lords, he would run on Roll20, and Donald and Shane and myself and a couple of other people, we would play through those at a kind of accelerated pace because it's a huge campaign, and so we would jump forward to the big break points and make sure that we were kind of, with Donald there, stress testing some of the builds that we had in Pathfinder. So there's kind of a mix, and then like Daryl, when Daryl's writing stuff, he's quite local, so he can come up or Tracy's the same. She can come up and run a game. We can get together face to face that way, but it varies. Generally, the authors will be running stuff on their own, and then Shane will get in and have a game just to make sure that it kind of lines up with what he's expecting as well.
Are you trying to break things intentionally? You mentioned Donald stress testing different.
I think that's just
builds.
Donald.
Oh, Donald, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted.
No.
So somebody has to make. So this is, we now have a Mikeism, because whenever we're in a design meeting and we see Mike go,
Oh.
it's because he's just had some sort of thought, or okay, I'm about to make us go back to square one because we've not considered this thing. Somebody has to elicit that response from Mike, and if it has to be me, it has to be me. But it depends, right? In Pathfinder, I was really trying to break all of the new class edges and all of the different variations, because that's the thing that we have to worry about, right? Is, okay, we've added another 6 or 7 ways for you to increase your parry or your toughness, right? How is somebody who's going to, and it's a little bit of playing not in good faith, right?
Yeah.
Because the rules have to work for anybody playing, right? And it's not necessarily somebody that's going to, make a character that has as high parry as possible is doing it because they're malicious. But the easiest way to figure out if you can be malicious with it is to just be malicious with it. And perhaps
we did a
it
little
may
bit
have
of that
gotten
too
to the point.
we did a little bit of that too with superpowers when we got to like cosmic level superpowers. There's so many points there. You can really go to town. We had some crazy builds for that.
That's interesting. Do you ever do you say, okay, we're going to jump in at a this level game and just test this, this side of things for those high end? Because, this isn't a thought that I've never had until the three of you started talking about it just now. But like, we've played a few games ourselves, that when you get to higher levels, they do kind of sometimes fall apart. And even though you might not be getting there, that is a really important part. I think Gloomhaven was one that we played a lot of.
Yeah.
Oh no, there's another one, something in the dark. But you get really high, and it just kind of starts crumbling because you're like, well, this is just too powerful now, or it doesn't
The
make
things
sense.
that were fun at a
with
lower
the supers
level.
particularly, you can start at that level. So we had to make sure that it worked and made sense, and that the powers scaled well for that kind of extreme power level. We did have some insane builds for those, but yeah, we try to jump ahead, like the Pathfinder playtesting too. Is because the adventure paths span basically the entire range of ranks for Savage Worlds. We would accelerate and jump through and make sure at this point we should have a lot of magic items, a lot of gear. We've advanced a lot, and so test that was still fun, and particularly that the encounters didn't become trivial at that level too.
Yeah.
So
I think one of my favorite memories from that is Mike had talked up for, I think, a month and a half at that point of how none of his playtesting groups had ever managed to beat the final boss of Rise of the Runelords, Karzog.
It's just a red rag for Donald.
Well, I was, because we would go in and we'd have like different, things that we were working on, right? And I was like, okay, well, let me just see what kind of crazy stuff can I make with a ranged character, right? And this resulted in us making a bunch of revisions to how a bunch of things worked. But I basically just went in and turned him into a pincushion. But you can't realize that that's a problem, especially when you're kind of doing something new from whole cloth, until you go in and say, okay, how can I try and make the GM cry?
Yeah, I like this. I'm seeing this as a mini series.
Because
I'm
now,
the guy they hire to play test their RPGs. I'm the bad guy. I come in, I make a 20th level character, and I just turn all their bad guys. Oh, really? You think this is a good move? Bam! I'm gonna exploit it.
I'm imagining a movie version of that, and it doesn't look as cool as.
Oh no, it's definitely it's a real world.
Mike had to take his lumps because now the community loves Mike, right? And the favorite thing that the community has is, I've seen some compliments I have to pass to Mike in the chat because they love making him blush because of how much people love Savage Pathfinder. So he had to take his lumps to get there. You got to jump him in.
Hey, absolutely. It's you can't just come in easy. You got to work for it. So we've got to hear from the three of you about, the process behind the scenes and kind of where you fit in. And Jess, we've got to hear a lot secondarily. But starting with you, what are some of the favorite things you like to do? I mean, again, the three of you end up being less in front as some of the other people we've gotten to talk to. What are the things you really lavish?
I really like getting to see the art like really early, and that's like a real behind the scenes thing that no one else is gonna get to see. You don't get to see the different choices they had and the rough from the beginning to the end. And then for me, making those into pawns is like my favorite thing, because I really like to see how many can I get in there. Oh, this art is really good. How can we feature it? Oh, this is a huge monster. Let's make sure he's as big as we can make him. And really kind of bringing a little bit of realness to the table where I can actually see the pawns and the different sizes. That's my favorite thing, because I get to work with the art and I get to, bring that kind of to life. So that's my favorite part. I do like going in the books and doing all the nitty gritty stuff too, but I really like working with the art and the pawns.
What's your favorite pawn that you've gotten to
Oh
create?
gosh. I'm not sure. Maybe the giant tree from Holler, because that was one where we were like, yeah,
Whoa.
exactly.
Oh, there it is.
Right
There we go.
hand.
How did
Very
you know?
cool.
Yeah. So
That's big. That's
Yeah.
a good thing.
and I also got to be luckily a part of the playtesting of the Holler game system. So, and there was only 4 of us that did that. So it was Tracy and Tim and Daryl. And that was a really awesome campaign. And so like I went all the way from the campaign to making the pawns and seeing that come to life. So that was really cool. And that was the big bad of our adventure. So
That's cool.
that's my favorite part.
Awesome.
What about you, Donald?
For me, it's very easy. Every Wednesday we have a design meeting, and it's just whoever's got a new problem, they bring it to the meeting. And like we were just talking about Shane's they're kind of like arcane backgrounds, but not really. It's kind of their packages for monsters. And we spent I think an hour and a half talking about what monsters should be in, what should they do, all those kinds of things. And even because I'm a designer at heart, even when we had a fantasy companion meeting that we spent like an hour in the meeting, and then Mike, Clint, and I had 2.5 hour meet. We had to break it up because we couldn't just do 5 hours straight because we had other stuff we had to get done. But we spent, I think, about 7 hours that day, all said and done, trying to wrap with these 2 issues. And it's like, you're clawing your way towards a design, and then Mike puts his head down on the desk. And you're like, okay, back to square one, right? And it's a process of attrition sometimes to get to a good design. Other times it's, you'd have 5 or 6 people like we do in our Wednesday meetings, and somebody says something that inspires somebody, and you have that moment where you see where somebody goes, oh, wait, what if we did this, right? And it's quick and easy, and just kind of that process and getting to experience that design, especially having a time that's carved out for it. Because I spend a lot of my time clawing and fighting and trying to get through all of the tasks that I have to do that we just, it needs to get done, right? It's production, it has to get done to maybe free up some time. Like I might be on the hook to do some cards for the Horror Companion / Pine Box Middle School that I'm excited to do.
Awesome. And what about you, Simon?
So for me, I get the first deliveries of the production proofs, and so that for me is the thing that I look forward to. It's difficult because for every project they take such a long time, right? I've been looking at them from when they're like maybe in a blank layout with no trade dress, and then I'm still looking at them long after everyone else is finished because I'm dealing with the printers and I'm going back and forth with them about minor corrections or anything that we found that absolutely has to change all the way through all the proof period. So there are multiple products that in various stages of completion that I've been looking at for a really long time. So to see printed boxes come through in shrink wrap is just like this is great until we find a mistake, and then I hate it.
Then it becomes living nightmare.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, that must feel so validating, to see it from a tiny little narrative bud to a full-blown book riddled with too many periods. That's exciting. That's really fun. Except for the ones that don't get printed, and then they can just go suck an egg or something.
We usually find a way to come back to something later. But
fair. That's awesome. Well, we're nearing our hour, and we had started a tradition during the summer showcase that we are going to continue because it's always a lot of fun. And basically, anyone we get to talk to and interview, we love to hear about what they're enjoying in their life, whether it be a new book or a TV show or a movie. You know, there are so many places that you can find things that bring you joy, as it were. Whether it be a deep YouTube rabbit hole, and sharing those with the community at large, getting to spread a little bit more of some weird baker or sandwich guy. I recently just started watching this guy on Instagram who just makes a sandwich every day. And they're like from sandwich cookbooks from like the 1920s. It's like literally a sandwich a day.
Hell yeah.
And they're weird recipes, and then he takes a bite of them. So what, for each of you, is just something in your life that you are enjoying that you would love more people to check out? Simon, let's start with you. Anything?
Well, I don't know if I can encourage more people to check it out, but I'm really enjoying like the new Game of Thrones series, and I'm loving Rings of Power too. But I think that's probably fairly widespread. Something a little more personal is that I just re-signed up for another year on the semi-pro football team that I play on.
Hey, congrats.
Which is probably a mistake, but
oh, that's brilliant. That's awesome. That's exciting. Yeah, I haven't seen it's House of the Dragon, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's called. I haven't seen it yet. I'll be honest. I was one of the people who was left with a bitter taste after Game of Thrones ended. I
understand that. I just love that world, you know, and seeing it realized again with a new storyline. I'm a sucker for it.
I mean, we are both enjoying Rings of Power for sure. That one I'm definitely enjoying. But I think I'll wait and binge the House of the Dragon for sure.
Right.
But if it's got the Simon seal of approval, then maybe I'll have to check it out sooner.
Yeah, well, then by that token, you also have to go play tackle football.
I was going to say you're going to have to join a football league. Then.
I'm in. I'm so excited. Donald, what about you? What are you enjoying?
Skip me real quick because I'm trying to find the name of it because I don't know the name of it.
Jess, pressure, right to you.
Pressure. I was going to say definitely those two shows are the number one shows that I'm watching right now. But another thing that I found out about, I don't know, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, are these two guys online. They do like a morning show on YouTube. It's called Good Mythical Morning. And they're like two best friends that have been best friends since like, I don't know, 2nd or 3rd grade or something. Aww. And they do just a funny like 15-minute show every morning. And it's called Good Mythical Morning. And they'll do crazy stuff. They'll try crazy food, or they'll just do like funny competitive activities or whatever, and games. And that's something that I like, I just need that 15 minutes when I wake up and I like eat breakfast or whatever really I'm doing. Yeah. And they're great guys. And so
Rhett and Link, right?
Rhett and Link. Yes, exactly. So if anybody needs something funny to watch on YouTube, and they have all their seasons. So there's like tons of videos.
That's awesome. Cool. I mean, the idea of a morning show, you know what I mean, which has been around for a long time, is wonderful. But they really kind of, especially in the network TVs, they really just kind of lost, at least to me, the appeal. You know, it became a lot of Dr. Phil-esque feel
and stuff. Like news. There's no news or anything. It's literally just them, and they'll play a game where they're guessing like the years that certain things came out at McDonald's, and like and then they're doing like funny stuff, and it's like 15 minutes a day. It's not like an hour-long news session. It's nothing like that. So it's a cool I want to wake up and laugh for 15 minutes. So That's awesome. If anybody ever figures out that show and hasn't seen it yet, just one person watching it, that'd be cool.
Hey, great recommendation.
One new person, great.
Good call. All right, Donald.
All right, so I found it. So it's a YouTuber called Takeshi Takashima's Kiwami Meshi. And what it is if anybody's ever seen, there's a anime/show called Way of the House Husband, and it's basically like this like Yakuza guy in a suit, and it's him just being a house husband. Well, this guy's got that vibe, and it is just him making amazingly looking dishes. Like I suspect there's no English subtitles except the auto translate, so I really don't have any idea what this guy is saying 90% of the time. But I suspect that this guy's a professional chef or something in his,
Does
in his
he do
day job. And
fancy
he's just
bento?
not really. No, it's all like, hey, you've been out drinking and you want to make something that is going to be nice when you go home, right? It's very much that kind of cuisine. But the dude is just, he makes all of these crazy, phenomenal dishes. And I suspect he's a chef because he also knows a little too much about ingredients. And I'm like, if you were just a good at home cook, you would know, like, go to this market to get this kind of cut because you need this thing for this meal. And he also has this adorable little Pomeranian in the background. But so it's just this dude he's doing kind of the, you know, like he's in a suit. He's got this fun little what's the thing you wear over apron with a little cat on it. He's wearing aviator sunglasses the whole time. Whenever he goes to cut something, he's like, and there's like, and he's got great music playing in the background, and it's just a fun, like almost ASMR, but not really. But it's ASMR for me because I don't know what he's saying.
That's awesome. Drop the name in the chat,
Harlan's
because I definitely want to Google that. That's totally
there's
my
the link.
vibe. I've watched hours and hours of stuff like that. That's just not like kind of weird nonsense stuff that just makes me feel really good. Great recommendations from the three of you. Appreciate that. I'm excited to check out all that, including House of the Dragon, honestly. So yeah, as we wind down here, let's go around each of you, starting with you, Simon. Again, the people, who you are, again, just so in case they caught it at the end and they only heard you talk, where kind of your role in the company. And then, you know, if you partake in social media, where people can follow you on Twitter and things of that ilk.
Oh, you won't find me on social media. That's I'm old. But I'm Simon. I'm the president of Pinnacle. I'm also responsible for making sure everything we make gets to the printers and back again.
That's awesome. So it's your fault if anyone gets
it's my fault, yeah.
Donald?
But you can't find him online, so don't do it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty easy to find online. If you Google search Donald Shepis, I likely come up. I'm also at Donald Shepis on Twitter. And I am a developer for PEG, so I touch basically anything that needs to be touched and do any work that we need to help get things out the door.
Awesome. And Jess.
Yes, I'm Jessica Rogers, but I go by Jess. I think the only social media I have is Facebook, which would be under Jess Rogers. I'm also old, like mentally, so so I don't do a lot of social media, but you can find me there. And I do similar to what Don does. I'm a developer, so I just pick up anything that needs help getting out the door, anything that has to do with production, and all the pawns. I am the pawn queen. That's also what I do.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again, you three, for joining us. The audience loves you. Listen to that. They're crazy about it. This has been an absolute blast. We'll be back next week with Fast Furious Fall Features. Part 2, episode 2. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Once again, my name is Harlan Guthrie. You can find me on most social medias at the Leary Valley, Liri, or I have an audio drama called Malevolent, malevolent.ca. If you like Lovecraftian horrors and you enjoy audio dramas, check it out. You can follow me at Malevolent Cast. It is just surpassed 500,000 downloads as part of the Rusty Quill Network. If you like the Magnus Archives, it's of the same network. So you check that out. And my lovely wife.
Yes, I am Jo Guthrie. I am the host and DM of Dice Shame podcast. We just released episode 155, I think. Yeah. Episode 5 of season 2 today. It is a wonderful actual play D&D. So if you're into that, go take a listen. And yeah, I'm all over the internet, so find me there.
Everywhere. But if you really want to see us again, you'll see us next week here. Thank you again to these amazing people and Pinnacle. Have yourselves a wonderful night, and as always, we'll see you around the table.
Good night.
Good night.